Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to part 3 of Concepts and Components. This should hopefully be the last part and we'll move along quite quickly. So let's start with security and identity on the AWS platform. And so the next section, we actually start with identity access management. It is a really big part of the exam, and we will go through it in labs and show you how to use IAM. But IAM is basically where you control your users, your groups, your roles, etc. And it's where you can set things like password rotation policies, multi-factor authentication, etc. We then have directory services. This has started coming up in the exam. You do need to know the different types of directory service, so we will have a lecture on this. We then have Amazon's Inspector. This is a new service that was launched at reInvent, and essentially it allows you to install agents onto your EC2 instances, and it will then inspect your EC2 instances for security vulnerabilities. So it will tell you things like if you are allowing root logon remotely, and it will give you suggestions on how to increase your security settings on those instances. Now, because this is so new, it doesn't actually come up in the exam, so we won't be covering it in this course at this time. We then have the Web Application Firewall Service, or WAF service. Again, this is a very new product in the AWS ecosystem. It was announced at reInvent. It currently does not feature on the exam. We have Cloud HSM. This can actually come up in the professional exam, but does not come up in the associate exam. HSM stands for Hardware Security Module, and it's a way of securing your cloud-based infrastructure using HSM devices. This does not come up in the associate exam, so we will not be covering it. We then have Key Management Service, or KMS. This can come up very lightly in the exam, so we will have just a lecture about what it is and what it does. Moving on to management tools, we have CloudWatch. This does come up quite a bit in the SysOps exam and can come up in the Solutions Architect exam at a high level, so we'll have a look at CloudWatch and the different metrics that we can create. We then have CloudFormation. CloudFormation is amazing. It's one of the best things about AWS. So we'll go through and we'll be deploying a WordPress site on AWS, and we're going to do it all manually. We're going to build out our own VPCs, install, launch EC2 instances, put these behind auto-scaling groups, install WordPress. We're going to do a whole bunch of stuff, and then it's going to take around 45 minutes to do, and then you're going to watch how CloudFormation does it in a matter of seconds. So CloudFormation is amazing. You do need to understand bits of it at a high level in order to pass the exam, but if you go on to work professionally as a solutions architect, CloudFormation comes up an awful lot. We then have CloudTrail. CloudTrail is a way of providing audit access to what people are doing on your AWS platform. So essentially, every time somebody provisions a new EC2 instance or makes a change, then this change will be recorded by CloudTrail. So think of CloudTrail as a way of auditing AWS, and this does come up a fair bit in the exam, and I'll go into a bit more detail of it in another lecture. We then have OpsWorks, and this is a configuration management service that helps you configure and operate applications using Chef. OpsWorks does come up in the exam, so we're going to have a theory section as well as a lab where we'll go in and create our own OpsWorks stack. So we will move on to that later, and it does come up in the exam a fair bit. We then follow with AWS Config. This is a relatively new service and doesn't feature in the exam, but it's a fully managed service that provides you with an AWS resource inventory, configuration history, and configuration change notifications to enable you to manage your environment both securely and give you governance. And then you have on top of this config rules, which enables you to create rules that automatically check the configuration of your AWS resources that's been recorded by config. So, for example, you can make sure that all EBS volumes attached to your EC2 instances are encrypted, and then config rules will actually show you using a traffic light system as to whether or not this is the case. So again, guys, Don't worry if that doesn't mean much to you. Config is still a very new service and doesn't feature in the exam. If and when it does, I'll have a lab on it. We then have Service Catalog, and this allows you to create and manage catalogs of IT services that are approved for use on AWS. Again, this doesn't come up in the exam as of today, so we don't cover it in this course. We then have Trusted Advisor. This can actually come up in the exam, so we will have a section of it in the course. Essentially, it's an automated service that scans your environment and tells you ways that you can save money, ways you can increase security, etc. There's two tiers of Trusted Advisor. There's the free tier, and then there's the tier that you get when you've got business and enterprise support plans. We will just be covering free tier, but the main thing you need to know about Trusted Advisor going into the exam is what it is capable of doing and what it's not capable of doing. So we will have a lecture on that later on in the course. So moving on to application services, we have API Gateway. This is a fully managed service that makes it easy for developers to create, publish, maintain, monitor, and secure APIs at any scale. It does not yet feature in the exam, so we do not cover it in the course. We then have AppStream. AppStream is really cool. Think of it as AWS's version of XenApp. Essentially, it allows you to stream your existing Windows applications from the cloud without any kind of code modifications. So your application is deployed and rendered on AWS infrastructure, and the output is streamed to mass market devices such as things like PCs, tablets, and mobile phones. Again, AppStream is fairly new and it is not on the exam as of today, so we do not cover it in the course. We then have Cloud Search. Cloud Search we actually use on acloud.guru. It's really, really cool. It's a managed service in the AWS cloud that makes it simple and cost effective to set up, manage, and scale a search solution for your website or application. It supports 34 different languages and popular search features such as highlighting, autocomplete, and geospatial search. But again, it doesn't feature in the exam, so we do not cover it in the course. One thing that can come up in the exam is Elastic Transcoder. All you really need to know is what it does. So it's a media transcoding service in the cloud. It's designed to be highly scalable, easy to use, and cost effective, and it's a way for businesses and developers to convert or transcode media files from their source format into versions that will play on devices like smartphones, tablets, and PCs, etc. So really all you need to know for the exam is what Elastic Transcoder does. It's a way of transcoding media files. We then have Simple Email Service, and this is an email service that essentially allows you to send transactional emails, marketing messages, or any other type of high quality content to your customers. You can also use it to receive emails, and then you can integrate it with things like Lambda, with S3, with SNS, etc. So we will cover SES in a little bit of detail. It can come up in the exam from time to time. SQS is comes up in the exam a lot. Essentially, it's a way of decoupling your infrastructure, and we will go have an entire lecture on SQS. You really do need to know SQS coming into the exam. If you remember the history of AWS, SQS was the first service ever launched by AWS. We then have Simple Workflow Service, and this helps developers build, run, and scale background jobs that have parallel or sequential steps. The way I like to think of SWF is Amazon themselves use it for when you place an order on their site. They actually use Simple Workflow Service to have the people in the warehouse go and collect your order, put it into boxes, do all the packaging and postage, etc. So Simple Workflow Service definitely does come up in the exam. You need to know the difference between SQS and SWF because it is easy to get them confused, and we will have a lecture on that later on in the course. Moving on to our developer tools, we've got Code Commit, Code Deploy, and Code Pipeline. So Code Commit is a fully managed source control service that makes it easy for companies to host secure and highly scalable private Git repositories. So think of it as AWS's version of GitHub. It's not in the exam, so we don't cover it in this course. If you do want to learn how to use GitHub on AWS, though, we do have an entire course devoted to that on the A Cloud Guru website. Code Deploy is a service that automates code deployment to any instance. This includes EC2 instances or even servers that you run on premise. Again, it's not covered in the exam, so we don't cover it in this course. But again, we also have a dedicated course on Code Deploy on the A Cloud Guru platform. And then Code Pipeline is a continuous delivery service for fast and reliable application updates. Code Pipeline builds, tests, and deploys your code every time there's a code change based on the release process models that you define. Again, not in the exam, so not in this course. Moving on to mobile services, most of the mobile services aren't in the exam, so I'll quickly run through them. So just starting with Mobile Hub. Mobile Hub is a way of building, testing, and monitoring the usage of your mobile apps. We then have Amazon's Cognito, and Cognito is a pretty cool service. Basically, it allows you to save your mobile user data, and this can be things like app preferences or your game state in the AWS cloud, and you don't have to write any back-end code or have to worry about managing any infrastructure. We then have Device Farm. Device Farm enables you to improve the quality of your iOS or Android or even web apps by testing them against real smartphones and tablets in the AWS cloud. We have Mobile Analytics. That's essentially a way to measure your app usage, app revenue, and you can track things like new versus returning users for your app, etc. And essentially the last four are just not in the exam, so we don't cover them much in this course, as simply just to introduce them and tell you a little bit about what they are. We don't cover them in any detail. Now, SNS, however, is a big topic in the exam, and we'll go so far as to have labs on SNS so that you understand what it is. But essentially, SNS is Amazon's simple notification service, and it's a web service that makes it easy to set up, operate, and send notifications from the cloud. So we have an entire lab devoted to SNS, and actually in production you use SNS all the time, so it's important to understand SNS. Okay, so moving on to enterprise applications. Now, Workspaces is an interesting one. It has just started appearing in the exam, but at a very high level, so you just need to know what it is. So Workspaces essentially is Amazon's version of VDI, so it's a virtual desktop in the cloud, so you can run Windows, for example. You can run Windows 7 using Workspaces. We have WorkDocs, which is a fully managed secure enterprise storage and sharing service with strong administrative controls and feedback capabilities that improve user productivity. What does that actually mean? Well, it's actually just think of it as Dropbox for the enterprise. So it's a safe place to store your files, and you can integrate a whole bunch of controls to secure that storage. WorkDocs doesn't come up in the exam, so we don't really cover it in this course. And finally, Workmail is essentially Amazon's answer to Exchange. So it's their own email service. And again, it's not mentioned in the exam, so we don't cover it in the course. And finally, this is the newest service, which is called IoT, or Internet of Things. Now, this is such a big topic and such a vast area. I actually believe it's going to have its own certification at some point. Now, this was only announced at reInvent a couple of months ago, at the beginning of October in 2015. So this does not yet feature in the exam, and we won't cover it in this course. However, it is something to keep an eye on, because I really think IoT will be its own certification course towards the end of 2016. It's just a feeling I've got. Okay, so that's it, guys. You've done really well. I know it's a lot to cover, but you have literally just covered every service that the AWS platform has on to date. So, give yourself a big pat on the back. It can be quite tedious to get through. The best way to learn AWS is to start getting your hands dirty, to actually start playing with the technology, and that's what this course will really focus on. If you are freaking out, don't worry. Move on to the next lecture, and I'll see you there. Thanks.